Yeah, can you hear me? Whoa, yeah, that works. Well, welcome all of you in this session about circular procurement. You have been hearing already a lot about procurement, but I'm just wondering who actually is working in procurement. Can you raise your hands? That's not that many. Who here is working in architect? Just a couple. Who here is a company? Company. Who here is public? Yeah, that's more like 50-50. Anyway, this time I don't have to do much because I'm very happy to introduce to you, oh, this is the wrong one. I had a couple of names on there, so apparently it's the wrong slide, but, well. Did you have the overview of the, well, forget it. I'll introduce them to you manually. So there will be 3 speakers. One of them is on infrastructure. So just to recognize that infrastructure is also a large part of construction, and he's talking about circular design, because it's not just about procurement. Procurement needs to recognize design. And we have an example of BAMB. I'm putting him in second, by the way. You thought you were second, but you're third now. And they will show that actually we have circular buildings already in the Netherlands. And the third one will be like a tender we're actually preparing on circularity in The Hague. So they will be talking to you. I will try to keep it quite strict in time, and I'll also ask you to keep it very strict, because otherwise we don't have discussion time anymore. So I'll give the floor to Marc Krielaert, who will be the first. I'm going to interrupt you. I don't know where the mic, here's the microphone.
Does it work? Yes. Good afternoon. My name is Marc Krielaert. I work for Rijkswaterstaat, which is like a part of the Dutch Ministry of Infrastructure and Water Management. As a child, I grew up and this was like on my primary school on the wall, like everything was circular in this image. And when I grew up, I found out that like many things were not as nice as they were in my first years of my life. So professionally, I work now for an organization who luckily takes this very serious. So we work actually on circular goals into an organization. First, from energy and climate to make Paris come true. The circular economy to work circular in 2030 to use 50% less primary materials as Rijkswaterstaat, which has like a lot of very big projects into infrastructure. And also to see it as like area development question, sustainability. So to place it into a wider perspective. My thesis today is circular procurement is not only about procurement. Like it starts actually with integrality, thinking from different stakeholders, different from contracting, from life cycle perspective. So designers and people from maintenance who have to share the same vision, have to start to get all the information for a project, have to start to functionally specify a project to see, okay, what are my stakes, what are your stakes, how can we get further to also be creative at some point. You see all these beautiful balloons there with all these ideas. So sometimes it also needs some energy, some creativity, and in the end to make integrally choices. Like sustainability is not a sidetrack. Sustainability needs to be integrated into normal design, into normal places. So actually, like now this pencil is like linear, but we need to go to a more circular pencil. We design with the front part of our pencil for the future, but we don't think about existing values. So we really need to have a shift in that. For Rijkswaterstaat, we work on a big highway project in which we looked for, what kind of principles do we have for circular design into infrastructure? First of all, it starts with prevention, not doing things or doing things digitally, making things more efficient. So find non-material solutions basically to retain value. So what do we have now? How can we keep this longer into into the circle? How can we reuse the existing materials we have in the projects? How can we design supply driven? So build with what we have actually. And when you have to make something new, create value. How can we then, when we are going to build something new, create something that's for the future, for multiple life cycle, etc. So this were the principles, so I just explained them a bit, and I will go into more detail, like what kind of examples do you actually have for that? For instance, for the highway in this case, it's like, when do you have a barrier, when do you not have a barrier? So find a non-material solution for, so now the car can drive basically into the side of the road and doesn't need this barrier. So sometimes you have the space, sometimes not maybe, but where it's possible, find the solution, or think outside of your discipline. So retain value, so see how can we, for instance, this is like a way to make the lifespan of asphalt much longer. So we can, from 12 years, now we can have 16 years of asphalt, which considerably causes a lower CO2 impact. So this kind of aspects of lifetime extension can really contribute. And actually, if you look in our past as Holland, we already have very circular examples. Like just after the war, we had a bridge that was not functionally good anymore, so we built a new one, actually on the old foundation, which was built in the 30s of the 20th century. And we reused the parts, because in that time the price of steel was very high. So we actually used these bridges on like 2 other locations in Holland. So we actually had to lift up bridges out of their own, like their foundation, to transport the other bridge to the place that it in the end came. Another thing is also like use natural processes, at least in big landscape projects. For instance, we use like the dredging residue, and we let it ripen so it gets the characteristics of a good clay, so we can use it on the place itself to hire the dikes into 10 years. So yeah, that saves a lot of transport, a lot of like material, and it's, in this place at Holland there's a lot of space, luckily, so we can actually put it there. So another one is like more from the value creation. So if you build something new, this is a water lock in near Kampen, in the Reven lock. It's a lock for ships, and there is an operational building. So, and in 5 to 10 years, we're not gonna use it anymore, because we know we're gonna remotely operate or waterlock. So what in this project we did was we did the research, what kind of perspectives are there on circular design. Yeah, a reusable building is movable and usable as another house somewhere. So that's the end solution that they chose. Or reuse it on the spot, or reuse it as another operating building somewhere else for another function, or reuse the components, or just after 10 years recycle the building into like natural components. So now with this, and into 10 or 5 to 10 years, it will look like that. So the basic installations for the waterlock itself are in the foundations. We also have now, together with market parties, like a living lab for a circular bridge. Basically to see how can we find a bridge that's which makes it possible to just move it, to adapt it, make it wider, make it smaller. And currently we're actually in November, we're going to build it, so the design is almost finished. Another thing, in 1998 we already reserved space for a road extension, and now 20 years later we will actually use it. So that's like the adaptable design, so now we don't have to change it. Actually then we already anticipated on the future, so that's something we did before the word circular was into our minds, but it's kind of a concept that can save a lot of material. And also, like a very interesting aspect, everybody talks about design for deconstruction, etc. But for infrastructure, like the joints into our buildings are very like maintenance sensitive. So yeah, what does it mean for the person who will maintain actually all this circular infrastructure in the future? Can they do it, or do they need new knowledge, or how do we design it, and from a life cycle perspective? This is an example in Nijmegen, the city of Nijmegen. Actually, the question was to make an entrance of the city there, but also they had less money than anticipated. So for the money of the traffic lights, they built a solution that also has the directions, has the lights, and actually also functionally it's better. There's a better view of the road, so it's more safe actually than a normal solution. So that's kind of a design thinking about how can I have less material but more functionality. So a lot of interesting ideas, but in the end you need some lifecycle assessment. You need to see, okay, how am I really doing? Am I doing good? Am I doing bad? What kind of a bit of help for the designer? So we have for procurement we use the tool of DoubleCalc, but yeah, it goes further than that. Designer needs to have like all parameters for circularity. So you can have lifecycle analysis. You have CO2, for instance. What kind of characteristics are necessary for circularity? So, story stored. In the end, like with an integral like collaboration process, think about design principles and that are not like rules or something. It's more like opportunities to find the opportunities in your project. Where is the chance to be more circular? And in the end, you need also a good assessment of like different alternatives. What is then the best solution? And we need to develop tools for that. And that always like input for circular procurement. So, what's in it for me? So, like every project is unique, what I already said. So these principles can be used. Multi-lifecycle thinking, the planning process. And also, like, a thing is that you need to challenge your contractors. And design is not only, like, procurement is not only the last procurement for realization. Also, like, in the process, we have a lot of different times we ask market parties to develop concepts, ideas for designs. And in that, you also need to have circularity into mind. Okay. Thank you.
Thank you. So, one question. What is the biggest problem now, or what is the biggest challenge now to actually get this into practice?
The biggest challenge is routine. Like things that we used to do, like we as a government, we have certain ways we do stuff. We have like specifications for everything, but also like our engineers, they have like a process, they do things. And together you need to find really a way. It's like a wrestling match, you know, to find how can we make our projects more circular. So we are like working close for this highway project in the south of the Netherlands with the engineering party. But it's like sometimes we have to go 2 steps back to really get circularity aspects back into the picture. So
we need to change our routines. Great story. Yeah. Well, I'd like to give the floor to Alistair. Please write up all your questions for now, and we can talk about it later if we have time. Of course, we started too late, which always happens, but we have 3 presentations, so we might have time for a couple of questions afterwards. So, thank you very much. Please, Alistair, you were the final step in for someone coming, not coming from BAMB, but we saw that there are already other people from BAMB, so I meet you everywhere, BAMB, so take us away in your great story.
Thank you very much. Yes, and proof of the circular economy, I am the replacement for Nitesh, Sander, and now you have me. Hello, my name is Alistair Burns. I'm the Innovation Development Manager at BAMB.
You go the wrong way.
And one of my major projects is a circular building platform where we can actually digitally allow people to share and procure materials, assets, products from each other. But there is a whole story behind that. Excuse me. And I'd like to show you kind of where it comes from. Let me see. Where are my slides? That's not my slides. 1, 2. That one? This one. There we go. So this is the interior of the Circle building in Amsterdam. It's an ABN AMRO building. And it was my first experience standing inside a building that had been completely developed with circular ethos in mind. But the secret is that didn't start necessarily as a circular project. It actually started quite traditionally. And the aspect that we kind of all walked into was, shall we do something different here? And we realized very much at the beginning that that was going to take an awful lot of talking and an awful lot of trust amongst each other. And this is the beautiful story behind it, what I love about it is effectively all parties involved just put down on the table what they wanted to get out of the project. You know, what's the bottom line? What's the thing that you must have? And from BAMB's point of view, it was very simple. You know, we won't make a loss. It's as simple as that. We don't have to make a large profit, but we're not going to make a loss. And so we effectively supported each other in our own goals. And that meant that as the project went on, and you came across problems, that you didn't start blaming each other for things happening or stuff not going quite right, but you actually started to work together to figure out how you're going to solve this and how you're still going to keep to the promises that you made yourselves at the beginning. And from that point of view, I really, really enjoyed it. And a little triangle came out of this. I like little graphics that help you think about stuff. And if I look at a triangle, you can put quality on one corner, you can put reusability on the other corner and cost on the other. And as these things shift around, you'll start to get some kind of idea of, you know, what kind of trouble you're getting yourself into. BAMB is effectively all about building present and creating future. I think my slides might be slightly mixed up here. And this is, in fact, the corporate vision. And the reason why I threw this slide in here is because it very much matches with, you could look upon the Circle project as a kind of prestige thing. You know, we're dipping our toe into circularity. It's not the first project that we've done, it won't be the last, but it's certainly a big deal. But it very much reflects where we as BAMB want to be in the future. And one of the lovely things about starting to work at BAMB, I started working in June, is that I keep coming across this mentality. You might think of us as a whole bunch of engineers that just want to get the job done, and we're blunt. But when it comes down to it, I have found a large amount of people that are thinking very broadly and very positively about the future. And they understand they have a place in there as well. And that's reflected up and down the entire company. What came out of the Circle building, the project that we ran with ABN AMRO, actually was a deeper requirement to digitize the assets, the materials, everything that we brought into the project. So not only did we build the Circle building from the point of view of everything must be reusable, everything must come from outside of a durable economy, but it should also be something that we can offer to the future as well. So we set up what we call a minimum viable product. This is very much in collaboration with IBM, who helped us a huge amount also not only on the actual development of the database, the front end and the tools that you can use to register products, register materials, and actually search and match them, but also in the business analysis as well. Because one thing that we've also learned is that you cannot do this alone in any way, shape, or form. The circular economy is gigantic, and I'm pretty sure that if you don't already have an appreciation of that, then today will certainly have nested that firmly in your minds. So, how we see future, I laugh because my slides are really kind of like taking their own little course here. Before you get involved in any kind of circular project, you need to do some fairly serious long-term thinking, and you have to figure out what you want to get out of it and what you're going to learn, because you can't solve all the problems right away, and you have to figure out which bits you're going to bite off and which bits you're going to go, ooh, that's a big one, put to the side and get round to later. You need to be thinking with this long-term mentality in mind about not only how you're designing your project right now, where your assets are coming from and how you're going to use them, but also how you might want to change that design in case you find something different that's actually more interesting and more available and will probably solve your problem faster. At the same time, you should also be thinking about what's going to happen in 20 years, what's going to happen in 40 years' time. How can I make sure that when I put my stuff into this building now, it's actually going to be relevant and valuable for the next building? There's an awful lot of collaboration, up and down, from all of the stakeholders of your project. One of the things that I remember people telling me about the Circle project so much was in fact the amount of toing and froing between the construction groups and the architect themselves in figuring out how best they can actually solve their problems together. You should be looking at flexibility as opposed to a long-term durability. Don't forget that circularity also has a large portion of repair in it. So you shouldn't be thinking about getting something in that is potentially going to last you for 20 years, but maybe getting something in that will last for 5, but you have a decent plan because you're going to be continuing and replacing this. And the other nice thing is if you understand when materials are coming free to you, you can actually create a long-term plan for all of the repairs that you have to do to your buildings. Innovation is key to it all. We're looking at new business models all the time. I personally come out of the games industry, of all places, which you wouldn't necessarily think is particularly interesting for construction. But the one thing that we do in the games industry really well is we sell digital materials to each other, and we create microtransaction models, and we create communities, and that's what you want for a circular economy. You want easy ways for people to be able to step in with no frustration and continuous little successes. And finally, your management of information is going to be an enormous part of it. We've been talking about finding out what's in our buildings, and that is going to be one of the largest challenges. But the really cool thing is that challenges are a huge amount of fun. And actually this idea of how I'm going to deconstruct a wall, potentially with something so simple as my iPhone camera, that's an interesting problem that I really relish solving. So, these are a few little lessons. I continually go back to what the true value of everything is, especially if you're putting together a platform where people are going to be trading with each other. I actually think that marketplace is the best way to figure out what's worth what's in demand, and that in that sense, commercial platforms are extremely valuable. But as much as you'd like to, you can't please everybody all the time. It's just not doable. The circular economy is gigantic, and there will be certain people that will be hurt, and certain people that maybe feel that their causes are higher than others. But the whole point is that we will get round to it. It's just we've got to bite off what we can do right now. Conflict can be good, as long as you are working together, and as long as you understand that, yes, your problem is important, but as long as you also understand that the picture of reality might not allow you to solve that problem right now. Maybe we need to wait a couple more years. Because as long as we keep moving forwards, and as long as we're working together, I think we're going to be fine. And I really look forward to a day where I look upon my house with very, very different eyes, with all the materials that sit inside it, and I think about it very differently. Because let's put it this way, probably about a year ago, I didn't think the same way as I do when I go into a supermarket and buy a plastic bag. Now I'm very, very ashamed. Now I think very hard about what that plastic's going to do. A year ago, maybe I didn't. I definitely think that the circular economy is going to change the way that we think about our entire environment around us. So, I wish you all the best with the circular economy, because I'm depending upon you. Cheers.
Hey, thank you. You can keep it because I'm going to ask you a question.
Thank you.
Thank you, Alistair. The first time I heard some relationship here between the gaming industry actually and circular construction. So that's a new one for me. But possibly with the data mining and the digitalization, that's might be in actually. I heard you were the expert in data mining.
I do a fair amount of I don't really mine data, but I really love what data can tell you. I love looking at pivots and
this platform you're developing, is that open for everyone? They can just order some materials from another building from you, or?
Absolutely. I mean, the whole point of it is that from the smallest to the largest, people should be able to register and search. And what I'd love is a situation where, for example, a large company would be able to aggregate an awful lot of, let's say, for example, they're interested in aluminium, that they would be able to order a huge amount of aluminium from numerous different suppliers all at the same time.
Very interesting.
Or, conversely, otherwise, that someone who only needs a very small amount still has access to that, but potentially is taking it from a very large supplier. What I think that a platform can really do is that we can introduce some tools, because it's all about how you describe what it is that you're placing online. And if you don't describe it particularly well, then other people can't use it very well. And what I like about the games industry is that we can make it easier, cheaper for you to sell your products if you describe them properly.
Next time we order some people to be in the room from the gaming industry to actually help us out here. One final question, what would you recommend to your competitors? Because I only see BAMB here, and there probably might be more organizations doing this stuff, but I think all of them should be in there. I know some of them are, but what helps, what made it that you are doing this?
Well, I think BAMB is very naturally in here because we're very large, and because we're very well established in the construction industry, and because of that, there's always a dialogue going on with BAMB with regards to what's the future going to look like, what are we going to do, how are we going to handle certain things. And I think that's very healthy. But in this instance, I don't think that BAMB wants to keep this for herself. I actually think that BAMB would very much like to open the doors, because we need this kind of platform, so undoubtedly other people will need it as well.
Yep. So that's what I think as well. It's not just competitive. Well, we're going to conclude with a very good example of actually public procurement, and then we're going to have a small discussion, if we have time left, from Yvette Watson.
Thank you.
And now focus on how is it actually happening if you have to do it from the procurement side, which apparently is challenging, but not for you.
Well, it is actually. Thank you so much, Kuno. Well, as Kuno said, I would like to share our story. We're totally in the middle of our story, but I'd like to share it with you on the procurement side, from the organization side, who is asking the question to the market, and how you influence the market to innovate and, grow together, learn together. I have my own company, 5 Factory, and we help to accelerate organizations towards a circular economy. And before that, I was facilities manager at the Royal Library in the Netherlands. And now we help them as an external party with their housing vision. Because you see this beautiful building, 80,000 square meters. And, what do you notice from this building? Anyone? The first thing you notice? There are no windows. So this was built for books, and in '82 we were working with books, 850 people all the time, and they don't like daylight. But as now we are much more digitalized, and we're a front runner in digitalization, we do need windows. So this is doesn't fit our standards anymore, and we have great issues with asbestos and maintenance. So about 3 years ago, the National Library agreed upon looking for new housing. And with a new vision, or where we want to be in the next, 20 years, we got quite a complex role in the Netherlands. We are the mother of all libraries, so it's like an interconnection with all different parties in the Netherlands. we, of course, also have the great cultural heritage. All the books there were from 1500 on till now. We have them in great big storages. But also frontrunner in how to maintain digital information, how to preserve digital information. This is quite difficult, I hear, from all the specialists. But we need different housing. We need housing that fits to play a good role in a national network, but also in an international network, because we're knowledge partners for all international organizations. So our ambitions for this new housing we're looking for were quite clear. We wanted to have a building that showed the meaning of the National Library, with this complex role. Secondly, it must be optimal flexible, because the only thing we do know that we will change over the coming 10, 15 years quite a bit, because the library field is changing so much these days, for public libraries, but also for national libraries. So flexibility is so important. And then when you think of flexibility and the aspect of time in objects, then it's utmost important that you also think of the value of materials within this time frame. So circular was a big ambition, and the fact that we wanted to have it energy neutral. So first we were like real researchers. We wanted to know what is a circular building and how we're going to approach it. But then very soon, and we brought the whole market together, and we wanted a method and a tool. And then very soon we acknowledged that, of course, it's important to know what circularity is within building aspect. But it's so much more important to collaborate with the market on how to get the highest performance out of each other, because it's new. We're experimenting. We're trying to get to speak the same language. So we had a lot of not market consultations, because that's much more official, but market gatherings to discuss on what is a good responsible commissioning. So how should we behave as a company who asked the question to help the market to give their best. And yeah, well. So from there on, we made a strategy. A very important thing is we said we wanted to be energy neutral, right? And we wanted to be that on the spot, and that's quite difficult in the middle of a city where you don't have a large ground plate. So we acknowledge that we as an end user, we have a large influence on how we use the building, because that's the main purpose, right, of building the building, is the usage, period. And so we acknowledge there is a large influence there, and we can influence that as the company. So we said maybe we should downsize all the tech in the building, so we don't need as much energy uses. So let's build a building with no climate control. So it's all within the materials and within the neutral climatization. So we don't need as much energy, so we can fix it on the ground plate. Also together with market parties. We defined within the building layers of brand. I think maybe you know the system on the strategy for circularity per layer, because you can imagine that the layer of the construction has a different time frame than the layer of the furniture within the company that's more in the middle, right? So we have a different strategy for every layer. And also using different business models per layer. Pay-per-use constructions, sell and buy and sell back constructions. So it's different if we own or if we have to use the climate installation for like 35 years. It's quite difficult for a company to say, okay, I'll do a pay-per-use construction, because your balance will be totally out of control there. And we acknowledge that a total cost of ownership approach, where we more focus on OPEX, on the operational costs, than the CAPEX, the investment costs, creates a totally different investment budget thingy. And then, of course, how would we measure circularity? we worked together with Alba Concepts, and they made a model based on two concepts: the usage of materials and the detachability. I don't know if it's a word, but in Holland we say detachability, the possibility to detach the materials. And this together, and then measured with all the components that an offer, like a building consortium makes an offer. And we say, okay, let's say here you have the formula. Let's say we want 34% of the building totally circular. Then this is the aim, and we can measure all the components that are being used within the offer that the consortium does. We can measure if that's right. And then in the contract, we say when we are going to further design it together, then we'll try to step it up. So it's a tool to get the best out of each other in the market. And I wanted to share this with you too, because we had a lot of discussion about whether putting in extra tech, but that to have a higher energy efficiency or to create energy, of course, but that has a large impact on your material balance. So how can we have these two transitions, the transition to the energy transition and the transition towards a circular economy? How could we combine that? And we believe we need a carbon equivalent to match these two transitions, to match them, to combine them. So if we have an equivalent for materials on CO2, it's much easier to make good decisions forward, because now it's only either the one or the one. I was in Samso this year, and there was this farmer, and he said, "Oh, I did so well because I had this warm pump. I have two in my house, actually, so I don't need the energy anymore. I don't need gas." Great, but why didn't you, I said, let's stop the heat going out. Yeah, why didn't you isolate your house better? He said, oh, I hadn't done that, but then he only had needed one pump. But this is, so if it's only about the energy transition, we make different choices. Well, that was my point here. So we're making a model now to combine these two transitions with other market parties. And if there is time, Kuno, I wanted to share a short story about what the most difficult thing is.
2 minutes.
Oh, that's fine. The most difficult thing within this process, and we're still in it, is to keep everyone on board and keep your board on board on where you believe in and your ambitions you have. And a great lesson I learned is this is the first the Dutch national librarian you see here, Charles Flamand. And what I reckoned is for your company to really believe in the ambitions you have there, because maybe it starts with one person who says, oh, we really need to do this. It is so important to match your goals to the primary process, the goal of the company. So for instance, the National Library, they believe that with their whole collection and with their knowledge, they make people smarter and more creative. Everyone who deals with the books and all the knowledge. So I said, well, we have an obligation towards society, right? And what if we see this project as a learning project and we share every bit of information with everyone? Isn't that a good deal? And then the board were really enthusiastic about that. And then another really great quote from an architect, Thomas Rauw, you may all know. He said, well, maybe we should look at the economy like a library and borrow the materials from the earth. And that really went well for the library, of course, too. So to match your goals on ambitions with the primary process of the organization is a really important thing, I think. Thank you.
Thank you. So it's like lending materials from Earth and then giving them back somehow.
Yeah.
And don't get fined because you're too late.
Yeah, exactly.
Summarize the story. Thank you very much. Right now, we have about 15 minutes. I'm going to do a poll, actually. So what needs to be done on circular procurement to be taken seriously? I don't think I need it right now, but I'll find out. And it's a question also to the audience. And can I ask you to sit down? Yeah. Just for a couple of minutes, and perhaps we can share some insights here. I see no one is awake, so I'm not quite sure if we can get some action on that. But if there is, then please. So, what I experienced here is that we talked a lot about circular buildings. We didn't really talk about the procurement itself. We didn't talk about any legal issues, which is a first for me. Usually when I step in a room, it's about procurement. It's always legal people telling me it's not possible, or it's very difficult at least. So what are your views upon the procurement procedure? Just shortly.
Yeah, I think like the procurement procedure is like consists of a lot of contracts actually. Like as like a big party as a big client or government in Holland, the market. Yeah, is involved on different moments into the process. So in each of these moments, you make decisions for circularity or not. Like in the sentence, are we going to build a bridge? Are we going to build a tunnel? These are very like different. They have a very different material outcome. Like a tunnel is like maybe 10 or 100 times more material than a bridge. So this kind of like thinking needs to be in every step. In the first step of your planning till like the end. So in the end, it leads to land into like the procurement is the last hurdle actually for circularity.
So actually, it's not a problem.
Of course, there are from the piece of like if you think about like the materials we have, we don't know enough about them. Like
Are there
can I
any
still use it?
lawyers
Or
in the room here,
no.
by the way? Any legal people? So finally, there's one. That is good. No, just so. If that's not an option, then no problem, so why don't we just do it? I'm just referring to this one for a second, because I see there's a lot of things like visibility of examples needs to become the norm. Yeah, that's a good one. Actually, we have the city of Utrecht who said you need to be doing circular procurement unless you can say why not. I like that one as well. And there was a lot about communication. Well, that's what we do right here. Training. That's a nice one. Are we training public procurers or other procurers? Are we doing that? Are you training your people internally?
That I can't tell you about, and unfortunately. What I was going to offer was potentially a solution to procurement being very difficult. I mean, we keep on talking about not having enough knowledge. And we keep on talking about it being difficult to find out, if a particular piece of steel still fits the quality benchmark that it got given 20 years ago, because I can imagine that that's one of the steps in procurement that you're going to be qualifying that against, whether or not this actually legally stands up and can be used. And the way that I kind of feel about this, that this isn't necessarily a people problem, this is a data problem.
So knowledge is a data problem.
Potentially there, and actually I think the solution doesn't necessarily live in people either. I think people need to have, in this sense, a green light or a red light. Is there enough data or not? And
do you agree upon that?
Small army of AI bots that I would unleash upon the world to eventually go gather data. I don't think it's something that we need to do ourselves.
Well, you are clearly about data.
I would like to react on that. I think your solution is great, and I do understand what you say about that we need the data. But I really do think it's a people problem, because I don't think we have a technical challenge here, because there's so much available and you're working on even more innovation on that. And I don't think we have an economic problem, because I think we have a much bigger economic problem if we keep on going forward as we do. So what is the problem? And this is social innovation. This is, we need to want a different, we need to collaborate together through new solutions, and this is all within people. So I think this is a people problem. And also with procurement is there, and also public procurement. And in Holland, well, no, everywhere, we have the European rules, of course, but this is all based on equality of opportunity for the market parties. So if you can do so much within the procurement you could bring all the parties together if it's open, if anyone can attend, and if you write a good report on what is all said. So the chances and opportunities are still equal. It's the only thing that you need is you must want it, and you must want time to invest in it. So
you say it's a people problem, it's a data problem. So what are the people not doing? Is it because they are in their own routines? What else do we need?
I think you're right. We're human beings, so we fall back on stuff that is easy. And I would also throw in another dimension as well. There's a good chance that I'm wrong about a lot of this, but I also feel that austerity has a large part to play with the current positivity that we see in our markets. At the moment, we're back in a situation where we want to spend money, where we want to build things, where we want to do stuff. And the easiest way to do that is the old way. There's a very good English saying, make hay whilst the sun is shining. So I'm pretty sure that, someone somewhere is expecting the money to run out at a certain point.
Yeah, our linear economy, of course, has given us all this wealth, so why change it?
But now is exactly the time to change.
But it seems to be necessary to change it anyway. They're saying here, make it a pan-European trend. Define goals, legitimize circularity. I think a pan-European trend might change actually the behavior of all these people. Would that work?
I think also there's something else at stake as well. Like I think there needs to be a gut of people to really go for it. Even if the legislation or the like a lot of things are actually hindering circularity in our process as like a big party, like the laws at some point. So there are challenges to take, and people like from the safety, constructive safety, don't want to go that far with secondary materials sometimes. And there are like a lot of research areas that we need to find out more. How can we design? How can we use? And what are the characteristics of secondary materials? I think that's a big challenge as well to develop more knowledge about that, because there's a lot of secondary materials, but it gets a very low value use function mostly after its first life. So that's something that also needs to be figured out.
So we actually do need guidance as well.
We need, yeah.
And I see here another one which hasn't been mentioned often, but to create trust. That's one I recognize often in practice, that we seem to be focused always on distrust in procurement. There has been a lot of problems there as well. How can we create more trust that we actually can collaborate with companies without being afraid that you will be caught in court? Yeah, one.
I have a view on that, because I think trust is something that really appeals to our feelings, right? But I question myself often, do we need trust when there is total transparency? So if there is transparency, and there is like transparency also what your goals are, is trust needed? I think not.
That's a nice statement. I didn't hear that one before.
So
if we have transparency, we don't need trust. Good one.
Or you don't have to have blind trust, let's put it this way. The simple act of being transparent
you can have trust and still check.
Yeah. But again, I would go back to maybe we shouldn't be going into projects with this expectation that someone somewhere is going to create a liability and we're going to have to fight over whose fault it is. Maybe we should be going into our projects thinking, we're going to try and do something really cool here. Yeah. And if it goes a little bit wrong along the way, or if it goes really wrong along the way, we'll work it out. But we're not going to go to court, and we're not going to sue each other. And that might be a very nice way of...
So we're going to draw up a contract that we don't sue each other.
Pretty much.
Okay, I think we have to wrap up almost. Any final statements here? Maybe from the audience, if there's something that we actually really missed, this is your time to do it.
Maybe one last thing. I think also like politics is also very very difficult sometimes, especially for like a governmental organization, like going different direction, but also like our organization, we do a lot of research. Okay, how can we do it more sustainable? But in the end, still our board chooses for a less sustainable option. So, yeah, because in their time of rain, there's not something they can show, oh, I built this or I built that. It takes longer time maybe to do circular stuff. You need to like give the contractor more time maybe to realize the project.
So we need to extend the period that people are in office.
Yeah.
Yeah,
we need
we have some nice suggestions for today that we can take back to our government. Will easily be implemented, no problem. Any other things, maybe final? We are just doing these questions on the screen, but if you have a question right now, we can actually take this forward to you. How many minutes do we have? Because I think we have to leave here at
6 minutes.
6 minutes, great. So who has a question? A legal person.
First, I am not a lawyer here in Europe. I'm a lawyer from the Philippines. I'm an anti-corruption and procurement lawyer since 2006. And I'm here in Europe for my PhD in law. I'm working on sustainable public procurement for innovation towards smart cities. That's why I'm interested in this forum. But one thing that I have noticed is that since I work in a developing country, I fought corruption. I had death threats in ensuring that we will be able to protect the procurement projects of the government agency that I was at that then representing. But the problem with this sustainable and public procurement is that in developing country, this might not be acceptable. Why? Because 30 to 40% of the government projects, specifically in procurement, went to corruption. We all know that. We can even check on Transparency International. Even I can speak for my country, the Philippines. That's why I am advocating sustainable public procurement. Why? Because this is a subtle way to make sure that there will be integrity, and then you will be able to protect the government funds without having to fight, corrupt officials. Because if you do anti-corruption directly, you will be like in the limelight and you get death threats. But if you will promote sustainable public procurement, circular procurement in the national government agencies, that's like subtle way of curbing corruption because you'll have transparency. And then the traceability of the materials are very important. You say materials and functionality. In developing countries, materials, the cost of materials are the cost of corruption. Yeah. But if you will do...
It's indeed a problem that we've often faced. We also see it in some countries in Europe where corruption is still a little bit bigger than other countries. It's a balance. It's not like you don't need integrity, you don't need to fight fraud. Sorry, I answered this one. We have an expertise center, which actually being created because of the fraud in construction. Yes. But still 90% are only working on integrity and only 10% on sustainability. So my perspective, there always is balance between these two.
Yeah, so last is about the pulse survey on international and national. I work for Asian Development Bank as legal and procurement specialist, where I reviewed procurement laws of national government. And I know that international organization can influence the national government to change their policies. Yes. That's why I have been advocating that the international organization, at least in their projects that are projects in the developing countries, make sure that it will be sustainable public procurement.
So in the program as well for the sustainable development, I think it's important to recognize these differences between regions and countries. So anyone else for the final question? Who wants to make a statement? Who dares? Yes. Yeah, you need the microphone to actually make yourself understandable.
This is actually just a question. One of the things that I don't hear in the debate is the accountancy standards. Many secondary uses are not really taken into the books by regular business models. What I've heard is that it's difficult for companies, for instance, material suppliers for the industry, to really showcase financially what the word is of a secondary appliance. So I would like to know how all of these ambitions fit with that very serious barrier. Because if you cannot get it accounted for, you might not get your annual account signed off by a big consultancy firm, like PwC or any of the other big four. And that is obviously a big risk for your board to make a decision on doing any circular project. Do you have a view on that?
I leave that to the expert.
I agree with you. It's an enormous headache / opportunity at the same time. Let's not be blind to the fact that circularity, durability is not called an economy for nothing, and it is going to change things. I would postulate that, in fact, we'll be looking at a new value system. And we're very much going to have to get our heads around that. I'm not saying that the old value system is going to disappear. And I'm not saying that, you know, all of a sudden we've got a brave new world as well. But there's going to be a new factor that runs very broad and very deep that is going to take us a long time to figure out. And there will be headaches. But some accountants are going to become very rich as well, trying to figure this out. So I would suggest it depends on your point of view. If you see this as a problem, then you'll deal with it as a problem. If you see it as an opportunity, then you're going to make something out of it. Sorry.
So, thank you very much. Final statement of
Also, I think
10 seconds.
From infrastructure, we don't have like a good value management at the moment, so we don't know what's the value actually of our bridge or of our material. So that's really a driver we need. And now in our contracts, all in the projects where a lot of material, secondary material comes free, there's no like stimulation, or there's no like because the material automatically goes to the contractor. And from a governmental perspective, you don't know what's happening to it. Will the contractor use it in a good way, or will he put the material into like an old pit somewhere, away, or because it's more economically viable? So. Yeah, that's also for like from a governmental perspective. There's also a need of like a financial thinking and a financial auditing on these things. I think, yeah.
I think we need to work on that and give this information next year. Thank you very much. Big applause for this. And I think we will have the plenary session here. One more question from Pekka.
Just a little bit of publicity. Thanks a lot for this session. Actually, I've been contributing to one guidance for procurement. That's a global book that will come out electronically a couple of weeks by UN Environment. That also contains case studies from developing countries, developed countries. It's not on circularity, it's on sustainable procurement. So those of you who are interested, I try to disseminate you the link once it comes. It will not be printed out, but it's an electronic version. There was much more to discuss about that, but not now. Thank you.
Thank you very much. So we wrap this up. I already see people coming in. Thank you very much. If you have any more comments, please find us somehow after the meeting. Thank you.
The organic questions were good, I think. So, well, at some point it doesn't work otherwise, because I didn't see much response. It's like, so the people are not online or something. I put my bag somewhere. It's you. That's my bag. What's the black? Oh, it's behind the curtain. Where did my bag go? Feedback.
and I don't know whether we'll have time to invite any questions from the floor. But,
on. Is my microphone? Yes. So welcome back to the last session. I hope you had some fun in your parallel sessions. I was in the procurement session here, and so we had some very good speakers and some nice outcomes. So what we're going to do now is very briefly just do a little sum up of each session so that you can get a sense of what happened in each one, and then we will just sort of do a final wrap up. So it's just a bit of a conclusion. If anyone does want to sort of join in, we won't use the Slido for questions, but if you want to make any comment at any point, then just raise your hand and we will use the old-fashioned microphone to get to you. So yes, we're going back to old technology. So listen, let's talk to the first session, materials passports, and this was Lars. Where are you? There you are, Lars. So have you got a little, do you have a microphone first of all? So do you want to just briefly talk us through what were the main conclusions from your session?
Yeah, so we had a very nice session. I think we had some interactions, some interesting questions in between. I would say that key things that focused on and that came out of the session is we're very aware that there is a need to educate also on the subject through and have this make sure that we're reaching out to all parties in the value chain. And also that, and we learned this from some more information that was given on the case study done on materials passports by Vito, that there is it's very important to show where the incentives are to work with materials passports, and to make sure that these are clear to the right stakeholders at the right moment in time. to also make sure that they know how to benefit from that. So why make this investment to work on this? And also in the design of products and buildings, these needs to be improved, and where is the added value in doing this?
And who do you need to convince most?
Sorry?
Who do you need to convince most?
I think from creating a bigger push, a very important one to convince is the building owner, is the developer, as they have a lot of they have a lot of power in pushing this through. But I also think that one of the key players here is really the manufacturer. These are the ones that have and carry a lot of the responsibility. These are the ones that really need to put in time and money to provide this very essential level of detailed data. And these are also the ones that sometimes might not yet see the incentive to do this. So I think this is also a very important party that needs convincing.
Okay, thank you very much indeed. So now the parallel session 2, which is the one here, that was circular procurement in construction, and that was Kuno van Geet who led that. And so Kuno, tell us a little bit more about the conclusions of your session.
Yeah, well, we had too many conclusions for this session. I think very interesting speakers with a lot of examples where you see that it actually is happening. So it's not something that cannot be done. Actually, procurement was also not an obstacle, although there were almost no lawyers in the room who couldn't complain, which I usually face when I'm in the room with procurement. I think one of the major things was there, why doesn't it happen on large scale? And there was an interesting point there that we need more data. But it was in the discussion, no, it needs to be about people. I think it will be both. There was also a topic about the materials, because now the materials, when we have a contract, they will go to the contractor. But actually, we need to become a salesperson. That's where we say here, the procurers become material traders. That's one of the statements we made. Actually, materials will become valuable, so it's not something like waste. So that's a very important thing. Also about tooling, one of the important parts is to include carbon in there. And that also relates to the other one. How do we relate to the real value of the building? Right now, we see it as waste after it's being built. It has other values than it is really. And to come to real action in larger scale, it's, yeah, collaborate and just start doing it. And there was one final thing, which I haven't heard ever before. What can we learn from the gaming industry? And that's still mind twist. But apparently BAM had a very good story about that online, and how we can learn from data collection and how we can make that more easy for people to use. So they have a tool to share materials. Well, that was an interesting one.
No, I was in your session and I thought that was great, because it's this whole kind of thing of sort of sectors learning from each other, really so interesting. And also there was a mention of trust, wasn't there, the need for trust. Yeah. And it was mentioned by one of the speakers that if you have total transparency, that trust actually isn't an issue anymore. But yeah, this whole argument about whether it's data or people that are blocking the whole the need for data or people's attitudes.
As in that, I think I will have to take that back as analysis as well. That do you need trust if you have transparency? And there was another issue there as well. If we have trust in Europe, we are some level of integrity already. There are other regions with other laws, and there's a difference between regions that you look more at corruption or stuff like that. We need to recognize that as well. It's not the one size fits all.
But of course, we heard earlier on the huge potential in the in public procurement that could really completely tip this.
Yeah, that potential. I mean, it's 20% of the market in buildings, and 90% of it is owned by public, but even the company. We can do it.
Yeah.
It's just we need to change our routine, and that was another one of the remarks. People just do what they do because they always did, and that mind shift that requires some action.
And the mindset from Alistair from BAM, I don't know where you are now, but he was the one who from the gaming industry. But his approach was that every challenge should be seen as fun. I'm sure that comes from the gaming industry. That you can either see it as a positive or a negative. So That was interesting.
Yeah, and the long-term vision, in order to change the mindset, make sure that your company or your public organization has a long-term vision and really feels it in its DNA that we need to change it. It's not just a couple of procurers who are going to change the world.
Yeah. Great. Well, that's that session. And then thank you very much indeed. And then now the parallel session 3 was what's after digitalization. And Wim de Backer, you led that session. And I see you've got lots of visual prompts here. You were very organized in your session, I can see. Far more organized than some, you see.
People that know me you know that's not true. But anyway.
So tell us your conclusions.
Yeah, so we looked at possible ways to do what to do after the BAMB project. And we already identified within the projects that there are 3 systemic ways to do that. And that's change in design cultures, a change in value creation definition, and a change in the way that we collaborate with each other. And we were a very small group, but with the 7 people that were there, we managed to have some actions, some leverages. I'm not going to tell every one of them, but I have them here. But the key thing is that for the moment there is a lot of data or knowledge there, but it's not entering the right spots. And so there was a big push to share this knowledge and to be transparent on it. So that's great. And to also have a positive communication about the short term, but also the mid and long term advantages, added value on that. And we have to communicate about that. And so the last question I popped to the participants is the role of digitalization within that, because that was the main question there. Yeah, there was still a lot of a big role for digitalization. But also conclusion was that you still need people to capture what is useful data and useful experiences, and that was very valuable as communication.
I think that's always reassuring for people when we talk about digitalization, that the people are still absolutely important. So the digitalization is sort of an enabler.
That's it.
But I guess it speeds things up. That's the point, isn't it? Because there isn't time to wait for it all just to trickle down nicely in a very kind of conservative industry. So it needs the digitalization to give it the push.
Yes, but also one of the participants said, okay, we have to push also people to work together and share experiences and not only by providing data, but really sitting together and working on a project or even between different projects and exchanges experiences. And yeah, I like that idea personally.
Good, great. Well, thank you very much indeed. And parallel session 4 is advancing circularity solutions in tourism and construction. And this was Dirk Gresser, who we've already met earlier. So Dirk, tell us a little bit more about your session.
I have not regretted coming here and spending the time in this session. It was quite interesting. If I summarize not maybe in the order how the presentations went, but I start with one of the really big statements. We knew it before that it would come because we saw it on the PowerPoint, which was handed in on time. And it's interesting for those, especially who have very less experience with tourism and more with construction. From the organization responsible for the promotion of Europe abroad, the statement came then how important sustainability is for the competitiveness of Europe. And I think that is for those who have cooperated in the BAMB project and who are focusing here on Europe, a very important statement. It's definitely the concern and the need of Europe to remain competitive. It's not that we are selling more tourist nights to Europe, that we are selling better quality, that we are promoting better quality, that we are attracting different guests to convey the messages. And then we had practical cases. We cared about showing that circularity here and the tourism sector is demonstrated also in practical hands-on cases. We had a large mega event, the London Olympics. We had the perspective of a hotel and the perspective of how circularity in a hotel is to be communicated. What are the achievements? It was impressive, but it also showed that the audience has to be addressed differently, different languages, the arguments must be different, although the things are the same, the actions are the same, but you cannot use one language for everybody. You have to understand your audience to pick them up, to motivate them, and to create the momentum. But how it was then concluded by Molly at the end, and definitely demonstrated that it was worth interacting and worth seeing and looking beyond the cubicle, because there's a huge potential in understanding each other and using the transversal nature of tourism for the future. As we are touching upon so many different actors, the advances which you have made in the construction sector can trigger much larger, as I mentioned before, much larger impact. And I just wanted to make over here an additional statement, because it might give you some kind of inspiration how we work, because very often it's difficult to understand UN organizations. But currently, the UN General Assembly has a report, which in the next General Assembly, starting very soon, will be negotiated, and there will be a resolution text on that. We wrote the report. It's about the future of sustainable tourism. And in the negotiation of the resolution text, we want to have many more of the ideas which came up here today, the concept of circularity, the prioritization of the sector, of the construction element. We want to see that featured. And if you asked the question at the beginning, what is coming after the BAMB project? Well, there it is. It is one of the documents which those who are reading and adopting the resolution will see findings of these projects, things we believe in should guide us in the future, being taken outside of Europe and inspiring other countries. Thank you.
Wonderful. Thank you very much indeed. Can I just pick you up on one little point there? When you say that you've got to get your arguments across in a different language, you've got to think about how you get your message across. Just briefly, for those who weren't in the session, what do you mean by that?
Well, it's one of the things where you wonder why don't you trigger the tipping point. And the tipping point has very often to do that you are not speaking the language. As a good communicator, you are not speaking the language of your audience. You are just preaching something, but you don't understand where people are coming from. And a general manager is not thinking in circular economy. He thinks in other terms. Yeah. He's willing to embark, but the language he speaks first, where you attract, where you build his trust, where you convince him, is at the first time slightly different. And then once he is embarking on, yes, then he understands your concept, your ideas, but that is what we mean, and a good communicator differentiates it on the language, but the core message objective remains the same.
Right, and just as the language would be different for a procurer or whatever, yes, I get you, right. Thank you very much indeed. So, parallel session 5, this is making circular building assessment common practice, and Julie Hobbs led this session.
Thank you. I actually started off with talking about Camilla and communication, and how we were instructed to tell people why we were doing this as a starting point, which I duly did, though I was fully expecting everybody to be already aware of why it's so important. So we went through that. We also talked quite a lot about the sort of technical underpinning of the circular building assessment methodology and the prototype that's being developed. And the reason for doing this is because actually, you know, the building as an asset or as a development is actually very complex, and it's also bespoke every single time pretty much that you go through it. And that means it's actually quite complicated to produce something that's going to deal with this, you know, complex system, multi-partner, multi-stakeholder activity in a way that's going to produce meaningful results. So, you know, it's very important to understand that it's not an easy thing to do, but to embrace that as a challenge, because the gaming industry may find challenges fun, but actually we find challenges fun as well. That's why we do these projects, and that's why we wanted to be involved in a project that was so technically complex and challenging. But then the trick is to then turn that complexity into something that's usable. So we came up with you know, going through this process and listening was the 4 T's. So creating something that's technically robust, something that's tangible. So it's evident that people want to use it. The thing that we produce, even if they don't understand what it is, they want to use it. So we need to make it tangible in terms of how you actually use it, how you access it. Time efficiency is another key aspect of it. If you want to make decisions quickly, then it has to be a time efficient process. You can't take months to make every different decision on every, on every different scenario. And then the fourth area, there's probably more T's I've come up with, but the fourth T was transparency. So being really open in our communications in terms of the technical underpinning, being open in terms of where we've got to and where we didn't actually get to. That's part of, it's a research project at the end of the day. We want to produce something that's tangible, but actually there's much further to go, and being transparent and about where we think we need to go. And then the sort of last angle of transparency is the data transparency, the open source, the open access to the data, and that actually links into the time efficiency is, let's use data over and over again. We need to think of it as our friend to do lots of different things in a complex but actually rapidly evolving built environment. And that means collaboration. It doesn't start with a T, but it actually means a lot of collaboration, which is what you obviously were alluding to. Togetherness, yeah, fifth T. I need to get to 10, but give me a few minutes. Yeah, and it was, we talked, we didn't have a lot of time for discussion, so obviously hoping to do more of that over drinks. But what was, the discussion we did have, it was like, well, how do I use it in this situation? And that's exactly what we'd sort of anticipated, is being able to put it in the context and get a useful result out of it. So making it common practice, I think, I'm not sure when that's going to happen, but making it practice, I think, is the first step that we need to achieve.
Thank you very much. And I mean, when you were talking to me about it the other day, you were saying that it is complex, but it's a bit like a car that, you don't actually need to know what's going on in the engine. You can just enjoy driving it in the end. And I think that's what you're kind of aiming for, isn't it? To get that sort of user-friendly aspect. The
dashboard, but we need to think of a more eco-friendly version of rather than a car. An electric car.
Yes, an
dashboard,
electric car.
Maybe.
Yes, that's true.
Or an autonomous electric vehicle. Yeah. But I think it's important to know that it is technically complex to achieve that, because otherwise, people may see something and think, oh, that looks really nice, it's got a lovely dashboard. But I think you should also look in the engine and understand the engine to make sure it's going to be fit for your purpose in terms of how you're using these sort of tools and methods.
Fine, thank you very much indeed. Well, obviously, some busy sessions, lots going on. Can I just to wrap up, maybe Pekka and Caroline, we can just sort of ask for your sort of final thoughts from what you've heard and from sort of the day overall. Pekka, perhaps you could start, just to give us some final thoughts.
Thanks a lot. It has been a wonderful day for me, learning so much about what's going on, and I think I don't need to repeat what we all have heard, and that's also summarized here, but just to make 3 small points here, or maybe before that even taking the gaming industry once again. So maybe we could think out of the box and try to network with other stakeholders also. Here we are, One Planet Network and BAMB project, but maybe even some outsiders could give us some way how to communicate the message better. So I think, to me, collaboration was an issue. There's a lot of things and a lot of knowledge around, but maybe we are not exploiting it in a proper way, so that it doesn't become routine. People are still stuck to their traditional ways of working, even though there are components that could be taken ahead. And then this communication issue. Maybe we have not been able to communicate to the right stakeholders or all stakeholders what all could be done now. So once again, we can do it now. We don't need to wait for anything.
Great, thank you very much indeed. And Caroline, from the BAMB perspective.
Well, I think we had a lot of very interesting interactions and very interesting presentations and thoughts, and not only from the speakers. I'm really happy to see how much interaction we had with the audience and interesting questions we had, and the interest that's coming from there. And well, it's also very interesting to see how circular economy is a global need. We really have to go there. And actually, it's about a change in mindset, and it's about doing. We have tools. We have to start doing in order to see how we can use these tools, how we can use these concepts, and how we can collaborate based on data, but also based on the exchange we have between different people. We've been talking about procurement and collaboration there. It's very important to have exchanges between the procuring entity, but also the different actors in the network, in order to be able to see, these are our objectives, how can we get there together? Well, these are very, very interesting thoughts that are coming up in the collaboration. And the built environment is something that is really important. We were talking about procurement before, but the design is coming up a lot too. So the mind shift in the different links of the stakeholder network is very important, and we all have together to work on that by doing it bit by bit and collaborating on it.
Great. Well, thank you very much indeed. Thank you for all of the chairs of the parallel sessions, and to Pekka and to Caroline and to all of you for all your questions. There is still time to have a drink outside, to have more conversations. Thank you to anybody who's been watching on the live stream. I hope we haven't kept you waiting too long for various sessions to start. That's always the problem when you're watching from somewhere else, isn't it? Waiting for things to happen. But thank you very much indeed, and I think a round of applause for all of our speakers. Thank you. So if you're travelling back, have a good journey back, and best of luck for the future with Circularity.